Is it possible to have a thoughtless mind?
For most people, I don't believe so. I am told, again, by reading all the history of this whole process, that that there is an end state where you reach a stillness of the mind, a superconscious state. But given my own situation or the people I'm surrounded with, I'd say that might be an eventual goal. But for the most part, it's not a thoughtless mind that you are trying to, but two aspects of it. One is to slow down the racing mind. And these practices help you just slow that down a little bit more, the pacing of all of the thought process. And second, as Jay mentioned, as these thoughts come, you don't react to it, you don't get triggered by it. You know how to process it. And you learn to separate your thinking mind and its crazy stream of thoughts away from what is your life all about, a reality. So it's not so much as about a thoughtless mind, but witnessing that crazy thought process and using some of these processes, especially meditation or any mindful based activity, to reduce it and slow it down so that you don't feel wrecked by it all the time. Jay, do you have
Awesome.
another perspective on it? That's a very complex philosophical question. That's why it's like hesitant. And I'm still developing my own thinking around it. In fact, right now, I'm reading the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, where I think he's done one of the best jobs in analyzing what goes on in the mind and espousing it. But it's a dense, impenetrable text. And I think it'll take years of study and thinking before I figure out that perfect answer. But
Right.
Jay, as a researcher on the brain, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Yoga Sutras. Yeah, most people might know the second line of the Yoga Sutras, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. It's the idea that translation into a rough translation of Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha is this idea that the goal of yoga is to quiet the turning of thoughts. A bold endeavor, whether we reach it, who knows? This is where yoga psychology and even Buddhist psychology or spiritual psychology is a new form of psychology which is coming into practice, whether it's Buddhist yoga or spiritual psychology. From the Buddhist perspective, I can say this idea, which ties into yoga psychology. It's understanding that everything in life is impermanent. Nothing lasts forever, including your thoughts. So you might notice that a thought that comes in or something which is distracting you, well, one way to recognize this is to first begin by reminding yourself, this is a fleeting thought. I'm not this thought. This thought is not me. It is just something that's passing through the terrain of my psyche or my mind, if you will. And so when we begin to do that as the first step, this can help us, the second step, which is called detachment or decoupling, where we actually can see the thought as something which is in our what's called our meta consciousness. We see it as separate from us. Okay, this is where mindfulness practice comes in, or yoga, yoga not as a physical hatha yoga practice, but as the psychosocial spiritual practice of yoga. The idea that the goal of yoga, if it's not to quiet the thoughts in the mind, it really is to recognize that the thoughts are there, and we don't identify with the thoughts, and say that our thoughts don't control us. And the moment we can recognize that, there's a concept in neuropsychology now called metaconsciousness, where you can begin to see the thought for what it is. And by just seeing the thought for what it is, we don't become imprisoned by it.
Another perspective I'll add to that is that often when I lead meditations at Google or other places, or beginning meditators will say that I'm frustrated, I couldn't stop my thinking mind. It's not so much as to stop it, but as Jay said, to witness it. And one aspect of that over years of meditation, I realized is so much of my thinking, so much of our thinking is about being anxious about a future that is not yet here, about things we worry about it, or dwelling over something that happened in the past. It's okay to think about it and reflect on something, but the 16th time when you hash out the same story and elaborate it and build fantasies around it, it's no longer serving you. And I find that the process of meditation not so much as reduces those thoughts, but stops you from that constant ruminations about a future that is not yet here you're worrying about, or a past, and spend more time being present and centered in what's in front of you. So when you're in a meeting, your mind is not run away. You're still in the meeting, listening to the presenter. And You're still thinking, but you're thinking about what is being discussed as opposed to thinking about something else.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So thank you for that, Dr. J and Gopi. I'll add my perspective on this. I've been trying to meditate regularly. My longest stretch without breaking was 107 days. So I've been on and off, but there were times where I did extensive stretches of meditation. And one thing that I don't know if this is thoughtlessness, but just like you explained, Dr. J, is like when a thought comes, how can you make it temporary and recognize that and stop thinking? So what I can now do is as soon as a thought comes, I can automatically recognize and stop it. It's almost like when you're walking on a rope, you kind of balance it. So I kind of make a balance. I don't know how to explain this. This balance where I'm stopping the thinking, but it's not still. I'm still trying to get to that stillness. I'm not there. And one thing that helped me is they say focus on the third eye. So when we try to focus on third eye, usually, at least in my case, I used to focus here. But if I keep my finger in the middle of the forehead, which is where our prefrontal cortex is, and then practice that meditation, focusing there, that helped me to get more stillness. I don't know.